Hello folks, my name is Rick Pearson, host of Prophecy USA, a program specifically designed to unveil the hidden mystery of America's role in Bible prophecy. What happens when Bible prophecy collides with a political figure who has spent years in global politics? Stay tuned, you're about to find out. Our guest today was elected 9 times over 25 years at 2 different levels of Canadian government and in 2 separate provinces. From 1986 to 2000, he served in the Alberta legislature as the government House Leader, the Minister of Labor, the Minister of Social Services, and the Minister of Finance. In 2001, he won the leadership of the Canadian Alliance Party and became leader of Canada's official opposition party in our House of Commons. And in that process, he increased its popular vote by over 1 million people. By 2002, he was appointed Foreign Affairs critic and chair of the Subcommittee on Human Rights. Soon after that, the Alliance Party merged with the Progressive Conservative Party to become the Conservative Party of Canada. And thereafter, he was appointed Minister of Public Safety. But in 2008, he did not seek re-election, and now he operates a very successful consulting agency called Stockwell Day Connex Limited. Stockwell is a national and international media commentator. Stockwell, we are highly honored to have you on our program. Welcome to Prophecy USA.
It's my honor to be with you. Thank you.
You know, recently, Stockwell, I heard you at the March for Israel, and that was in Toronto, where over 50,000 pro-Israel enthusiasts marched in solidarity for the support of Israel. And in your speech, you were politically correcting much of the misinformation that's being presented by the anti-Semitic pro-Hamas activists who are literally protesting around the world against Israel's current conflict with Hamas. And I thought it would be great to have you on and explain some of those talking points to our viewers by way of direct questions. So the first question that I have is, anti-Semitic protesters constantly state that Israel is an apartheid nation. Number one, what exactly does apartheid mean? And is Israel an apartheid nation?
Well, great question, Rick. And I am as mystified as you are that some of the mainstream narratives that go out, not just in the US and Canada, but globally, can be so completely off target. I mean, the word apartheid is actually, it's an Afrikaans word, goes back to the 40s, and it was describing the policy of the government in South Africa at the time, which is quite literally, if you look at that word apart, people are kept apart, and height is actually hood. So neighborhoods that were separated apart and not allowed to be part of the flow of society. So apartheid was a vicious and toxic policy, which thankfully was finally removed. So to try and suggest that some kind of apartheid approach to politics or religion or society in general exists in Israel is just completely unfounded. Just on a couple of things alone, Rick. First of all, anybody who lives in Israel, including the Muslim population, which they are significant there, everybody can vote. It's the only democracy in that entire part of the world. Not only can anybody vote, Muslims can actually run for office, and they do, and they sit in the Knesset, and at times, like right now, they actually form part of coalition governments, making laws, making rules, and in a truly democratic way. It's not apartheid at all. It's interesting to know, your viewers may or may not be aware that Muslims who are in Israel can actually sit on the Supreme Court, and they have. So you can have Muslims making laws at the Supreme Court level that actually rule the lives of all people in Israel. So not only is Israel the only democracy in that part of the world, they truly allow all faiths to be involved in the political process. And then it's not just on the political process. Rights of women are fully acknowledged. Those are not apartheid or racist at all. I mean, as we know, Israel had a female prime minister at one point. The rights of minorities, for instance, gay groups, LGBTQ groups, fully recognized, and those folks are full participants in society in Israel, which is a bit ironic and a little bit, I find a bit heartbreaking too, Rick, to see when I see groups in Canada and the US, for instance, chanting that they are queers for Palestine. Well, people can identify, as you know, as they wish in the United States and in Canada, yes. But you can't in the areas which any of the Arab countries, any of the Muslim countries, certainly not in the area which we would call Palestine today. Matter of fact, those people would be killed if they were flown there right now and stood in the middle of Gaza and proclaimed what they do, they would be killed. So the fact that mainstream media is so negligent in showing the error of that term apartheid, it is alarming, and it allows people to get all worked up unnecessarily based on something that is completely not true.
So in other words, there's no gay parades in Gaza.
Rick, I could tell you a gay parade would be a very short-lived one in Gaza, and it would not be a pretty sight what would happen to those folks. Matter of fact, whether people like it or not, Tel Aviv, for instance, full-on gay pride parades that would exist anywhere else in the world. So it's interesting you mentioned that one. That would absolutely not exist. And this has recently been articulated by some of the Islamic leaders in Gaza and in the Palestinian so-called areas, very strong by their lead mullahs just recently coming out in broadcasts talking about this would be the death penalty. This would not be permitted. And yet it is taken without question in North America and European media that you can say you are a queer for Palestine, when in fact, no, you would be dead in Palestine or
they
Palestinian areas.
They would literally
Right.
kill you.
They would.
Wow. Okay, on May 14th, 1948, everyone knows that Israel officially became a nation through the UN, who recognized them. But today, we hear the UN being referring to Israel as occupiers of the Palestinian land. So historically and politically, who are the original people of modern-day Israel, and who are the occupiers?
Well, again, Rick, you're hitting on some of the key points here, which, again, for reasons, I mean, we could explore for hours why mainstream media refuses just to look at the historical and archaeological evidence. And when we did the documentary just recently, I've done it in such a way that you can be an atheist or a believing Jew or a believing Christian, and still understand and agree on the historicity here.
Yes.
Everybody agrees on terms of the archaeology and the history. I mean, Abraham existed almost 4,000 years ago, 3,750, let's say. It was 2,700 years after Abraham, 2,700 years, that's almost 3 millennia, that we see the arriving on the scene of as he's called, the Prophet Muhammad in about 670 AD. And that's a long time. That's a long period of time. That land that was promised to Abraham, and then as we followed through history, the history of the Hebrew and the Jewish people in terms of maintaining that land, having that land, settling that land for hundreds, actually thousands of years. There's no dispute on that. And for people to say that somehow the Jewish people are occupying it, they've had that land for, as I've said, for just under 4,000 years. And a very late arrival on the scene was the Prophet Muhammad. And then, as we know, that his branch of Islam being very militant, they began to conquer and had widespread success in military, in their military conquests, eventually conquering Jerusalem. And then from that period of him conquering Jerusalem, for about the next 200 years, there were 9 separate crusades, and it was a back and forth, the so-called Crusaders winning Jerusalem back for Christianity and the Jewish people who lived there, and then the Islamic forces, and it was back and forth. But even in all of those periods, Rick, at no time was that land completely vacated by the Jewish people. There has always been a remnant there.
In 2019, Prophecy USA showcased biblical warnings of the coming New World Order. In 2020, we warned you of their plans to use COVID-19 to accelerate that agenda. In 2021, we warned of the Babylonian spirits who are invading our nation to provoke curses upon the land, emulating Sodom and Gomorrah. But what is next? Prophecy USA is proud to present The Coming Exodus, Unveiling America's Future. In this exciting book, you will discover where traditional theologians have missed the mark and why prophecy teachers have refused to acknowledge that America's role in Bible prophecy is rapidly being fulfilled. When you give a donation of $35 or more, you will receive The Coming Exodus, Unveiling America's Future. Or for a donation of just $60 or more, you will receive both books, The Coming Exodus and The Hour That Changes Everything. Call 1-888-306-1759 or visit us online at prophecyusa.org.
So right now, present day, we have Jewish people living in Israel who are called Zionists. And then we have another group in Gaza called Palestinians. And Palestinians also live in Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem was named by King David 1,000 years before Christ. So where and when did the name Palestinians come from?
Yeah, it's a fascinating part of history, and it's one in which people, your viewers who may have gone to Sunday school and then gone on with their studies of the Bible will know that, for instance, at the time of David, you mentioned David, there had been for some period of time an alliance of 5 cities in that particular area of the world. They were constantly battling the people of Israel, battling the various kings. And we remember when David took on Goliath, the Philistine, because that area was called Philistia, where these 5 cities, for quite a period of time, they would form alliances on a regular basis. Sometimes they would go to battle individually, sometimes on the basis of their alliance. But that's where you first heard that term, one of the cities in that area being called Philistia. And so the Philistines. What happened to them, it was under the rule of Nebuchadnezzar, 604 BC, that particular area of the Middle East was overwhelmed by Nebuchadnezzar, and his armies completely overwhelmed the treaty of those 5 cities, absorbed them actually right into the Babylonian Empire, and effectively they were never heard of, or that terminology was never used again until, very interesting point in history, under Roman rule. So picture now you've got the Romans, and they're ruling much of the known world as we know it. In the year 132 BC, and I'm using the before Christ, or we can say before the Common Era, right. Under Simon Bar Kokhba, very famous, very celebrated Jewish rebel leader, under Simon Bar Kokhba, the Jewish people did quite well in terms of threatening and pushing back the Roman Empire, pushing the Roman legions out of the area that we would call Israel. But the Romans would have nothing to do with that. At first, they were surprised by this upstart, and then they said, that's it, we're done with that. And they sent many legions in, conquered, completely overwhelmed the Jewish resistance. They went as far as and even Caesar going into the temple, setting up their gods like Jupiter. And at that point in time, as a supreme insult to the Jewish people, it was the Roman government who declared that area now. They called it Syria Palestinia. Syria being the form of Syria. And it was an insult. It said, because they knew the history somewhat, and this was a supreme insight. They took away any other designation. They said, this is what you're going to be known as. So even at the time of Jesus, where of course Jerusalem and Israel was settled almost entirely by the Jewish people, this is how they were designated by the Roman government. That's where that term came from and lasted for many years. But the Jewish people, as we know, did not depart from there. They still lived there. Very interesting, Rick. When I was doing the documentary just a few months ago, and in the area of Magdala, of course, Mary Magdalene came from that area, where
Yes.
it had been said by some historians that the routing by the Romans had been so thorough that there weren't even synagogues in that area that we would call Galilee, and up by Capernaum and Magdala. And there had just been a recent discovery, and I was there able to walk through it and video it. The stunning discovery, archaeological discovery of a synagogue that would have been there about the year 100 AD. Strong possibility Jesus may even have taught there, but showing a very strong and vibrant Jewish community there. So that's sort of the derivation of the word, how it came, how it went, and how eventually it became resurrected, if I can use that word,
Yes.
in the battles that were ensuing after 1948. And the people that left, Rick, the people that, when the war was declared, literally the day after the United Nations gave that land, recognized it, didn't give it, the Jews were all living there. They'd been migrating back from there for years. The day after, there were 5 of the surrounding Muslim nations declared war on Israel. And the rest of the world, sadly, basically stood back and said, well, Israel, we recognize you, your right to exist as a Jewish state, but you're going to have to fight your own battles. And at that particular time, and the number can be disputed, but about 500,000 people who would identify as Muslim or Arab were told by the 5 nations, get out of Israel because we're coming in, we're going to wipe them out. And somewhat over 500,000 left, thinking that the war, the 48 war, would be quick and that they would return. At about the same time, almost 1 million Jews from those Arab lands, those Muslim countries, were effectively kicked out. They were told they had to leave or they would be killed. So 2 things were happening at once. You had a mass in-migration of Jews from Arab and Muslim countries who were being exiled. And so Israel, just with very little resources and very little wherewithal, took them all in. To this date, Rick, since 1948, none of the Muslim countries which surround Israel will take in the Palestinians who left in 1948. They refuse to take them in. It's something that just doesn't get the type of recognition that it should. The Muslim nations which surround Israel and surround Gaza and what we call the Palestinian areas, that particular stream of Islam is so toxic that the other Muslim nations will not even take them in.
So the United Nations right now have consistently accused Israel of war crimes, yet other nations that do far more than Israel seem to be ignored. Now, as a former minister of human rights in Canada, why do you think the UN is so hard on Israel right now?
Well, keep in mind, Rick, on that important question, the United Nations themselves are populated, and some might argue a majority of those nations are not what we call truly democratic nations. They do not share what we call Western values, which were built on the Judeo and the Christian history that we've known for ages. They are very much opposed to Israel and the very fact that it exists. And so you will constantly see resolution after resolution every year at the UN where Israel is criticized for one thing, but other nations and places in the world where far more horrific things are happening don't get the same criticism. The business of war crimes, for instance, we all know, and I think we'd agree whether we're pacifists or not, war is horrific, war is horrendous, and tragedy happens in wartime. In any war, in any military engagement, citizens get killed, innocent people get killed. It's heartbreaking. It's been a reality since the beginning of time. Do you know, Rick, there are those agencies which actually keep track of in a realistic way, not Hamas statistics, but realistic down through history. This ratio, there's actually a ratio that gets determined of militants versus citizens versus non-militants that get killed in a particular campaign. For instance, the bombing and the firebombing of German cities done by the Allies in the Second World War, and people still argue about it, but there's no question, it was in the hundreds of thousands of citizens who were killed.
Yes.
And that was a decision that was made at the time to stop the Nazis. I was just in Japan again. I'd been there many times. I was visiting the sites of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And again, many non-militants were killed. Again, these are the tragedies, the great tragedies of war. But Israel is recognized, other than by Hamas itself, Israel is recognized, especially in this latest campaign, as having by far the lowest ratio of non-militants to militants that are killed in a campaign. For instance, much lower than when President Clinton took on the bombing campaign related to Bosnia. Many non-militants were killed, and that was seen as that was part of the tragedy of war. When the U.S. and many other nations took on the formidable task of actually eliminating ISIS, which they basically did some years ago, the ratio there was very high, unfortunately, of non-militants in the cities who were killed. The degree of the degree to which the IDF, the Israeli forces, go before they go into an area to attack or to hunt down the actual Hamas killers, they notify. It's never been done before in war before. They notify people in the area, please get out of that area. They fly over, they drop leaflets.
Yes.
They do phone, they put in phone calls where they can. They use megaphones. They say, please get out of that area, because the Hamas militants, we know now, and even the UN is finally admitting it, they set up in hospitals, they set up in schools, they put their artillery equipment in medical centers. And because of that, unfortunately, non-combatants are killed. When that happens accidentally, Israel always acknowledges it and steps up and takes responsibility for it. But going back to the ratio, and I'm sorry to some of your viewers if it sounds harsh that we can talk about ratios, but the ratio of non-militant to militant death in this particular campaign conducted by Israel is far lower than we have seen in any military campaign in history.
So the enemy of Israel is not the Palestinians, it's Hamas. It's the terrorist route. And most of us know that Iran is the number one sponsor of terrorism in the region. Now, this is a question from a political, economical I want to ask you. Is there any political or financial gain fueling the logic behind Iran by investing billions of dollars arming Hamas and Hezbollah to destroy Israel? Is there any financial gain there at all? Or is this just a continual family feud?
Rick, it is, in the eyes of the Iranians, it is the spiritual gain that they are looking for. They are a theological regime. And it's known and it's stated by themselves that each of their imams, or especially the Ayatollah, they dream of the day when they would be the Ayatollah who would be the one that would exterminate Israel. They dream of that. They talk about it. We refuse in the West, for some reason, we refuse to take them seriously. It is the main reason that Iran wants to secure the nuclear capabilities. I can tell you, Rick, and most analysts will agree on this, military analysts, defense and security analysts, about 2 seconds after the Iranians achieve ballistic capability to launch nuclear weapons, they will do it, because it is their stated spiritual goal, it is their sworn goal to their God Allah, that they will evaporate Israel. So this is where the Hamas stream, Hamas used to be part of flowed from what's called the Muslim Brotherhood, which again is
Yes.
pretty toxic stream of Islam. They've moderated slightly in some years, but in 1988, Hamas, if you can believe it, said the Muslim Brotherhood wasn't violent enough, and that's when they formed their own charter. Their charter, Rick, the Hamas charter, states in writing they have two goals. That is to evaporate Israel and to kill Jews all the time, everywhere. So when I see these crowds of people, and at times I've gone up to try to some of the individuals, even in the crowds, or some of the university deans who refuse to talk about this to their students. And I've said, do you realize Hamas does not want a two-state solution? Hamas does not want to negotiate. They want all Jews dead everywhere, and they want Israel vaporized. So that's the common thread between Hamas and the Iranian regime. Iran is very pleased and of course was involved, we know, financially, and we know through expertise, the building of the infrastructure of tunnels through Gaza and in those areas. And Hamas and Iran, of course, completely finances Hezbollah on the northern border. And they need to know, people need to know, Iran has one goal from their spiritual leaders, and their leaders are the ones who control the country. That is to evaporate Israel and kill Jews. And that's why they have the common cause with Hamas. And unfortunately, Rick, you mentioned the Palestinian people. Since the elections in 2005, the fear and the domination of Hamas in politics in the Palestinian area and in Gaza, they haven't had elections since 2006. They use the money that the United Nations, countries like Canada, the United Nations give to educate, to raise up two generations now of children and now adults who literally hate the Jews. You'll see in the documentary, you've probably seen it, heartbreaking scene of a 6-year-old Gazan Palestinian girl being asked what she wants to do when she grows up. And she says, I want to kill Jews. I want to stab them in the neck. I want to stab them in the head, and I want to kill them. The frightening part is that now the Palestinian population is overwhelmingly in favor of what happened on October 7th. They believe it was right for the murders and the rapes to happen. And this is obviously adding to the difficulty. It's not just that this rump group called Hamas, which has canceled all elections since 2006, they do control them. They torture their own people. They put to death their own people if there's even a hint of sympathy towards Israel. So the Palestinian people themselves, the huge majority, are actually in favor of what Hamas did and is doing.
Folks, we trust you enjoyed our first interview with Stockwell Dave. Join us next week as we continue to compare Bible prophecy with political issues of our day. This is Prophecy USA. My name is Rick Pearson, reminding you that God is in total control. Jesus is alive, and He's coming back much sooner than many people think. See you next week. Shalom.